Welcome again to Ask Dr. Maisha, where we're creating pathways to peace of mind. This week's question is from Don L., and he asks, how can I get off of Prilosec? Now, what is Prilosec, people might ask? I'm sure you guys have seen enough commercial to know that Prilosec, otherwise known as the purple pill, helps with gastroesophageal reflux, or GERD. What is that? Well, reflux is when, otherwise known as heartburn, is when the acid from the stomach goes backwards up into the swallowing tube or the esophagus and causes burning in the chest. Now, what Prilosec does is it actually decreases the amount of acid in the stomach so that you don't have as much acid to go back up into the esophagus, causing that heartburn. Now, there are definitely other ways that you can manage reflux so that you don't have to necessarily be on Prilosec. And the first way is looking at what types of foods you're eating and how are you eating. The foods that worsen reflux are fatty foods, greasy foods, foods that have a lot of caffeine in them, so your coffee, and unfortunately, yes, dark chocolate and your black teas that have caffeine, those can increase reflux. And how they do that is you have a muscle at the end of the esophagus called the lower esophageal sphincter. And that's just a muscle that when the food goes into the stomach helps for the food to stay in the stomach because it's closed. But if that muscle relaxes a little bit, then the food can go back up into the esophagus. And these foods, the fatty foods, the high carbohydrate meals, the caffeine, alcohol, smoking, these things relax that lower esophageal sphincter, allowing acid to go back up into the system. Now, another reason people can have reflux is if they have something called a hiatal hernia. And what that is when part of the stomach actually protrudes back up into the esophagus, and then of course if the stomach is up in there, then the acid actually goes back up into the esophagus. So that's some of the reasons why people get reflux. So then if we know why people get reflux, then there are some ways that we can sort of look at preventing reflux. And the first is avoid the causes, avoid the triggers. So when we reduce the amount of fatty, greasy foods, caffeine, and alcohol, and when we stop smoking, which that has a whole host of other benefits to stop smoking, then we actually help to maintain the tone of that muscle that keeps the food in the stomach after you've swallowed it and it passes through the swallowing tube or the esophagus. Now, the other thing that happens if you eat too large of meals, then the food can sit in your stomach and does not get fully digested in the way that it's supposed to. And when that happens, of course, when you have too much food in the stomach, when you're full, like you have to unbuckle your pants full, then that food can actually get pushed back up, and that can cause heartburn. So then another thing to do is to eat smaller and more frequent meals. Now, the other thing to think about is the types of foods that you're eating. If you're used to eating foods that are easily digestible and then you throw something that's difficult to digest in the mix, then you might have throw a shock to the system, and it may cause difficulty digesting the food. And again, you have food sitting in the stomach, and when you lay down, that food that's still sitting in the stomach will go back up into the esophagus, causing heartburn, or create more acid in the stomach, causing heartburn. And then there are just certain things that may actually cause an increased production of acid altogether. One of the biggest things is stress. Stress causes increased production of acid. And it doesn't matter if it's physical stress or if it's emotional or mental stress. If the body is overly stressed, then it produces too much acid. And when it produces too much acid, then that acid extra acid will go up into the esophagus and cause heartburn. So some of the things that you might want to do in terms of relegating this reflux are to eat the small, more frequent meals. And then there's a couple of things that you can add supplement-wise that will also help to further the digestion. I recommend, the biggest thing that I recommend is probiotics, because probiotics actually help to maintain the natural flora of the stomach and intestines. And when you have that natural good bacteria in the stomach and intestines, then the things can get digested in the normal way that they're supposed to be digested. Another thing you might consider doing is taking digestive enzymes. If you don't want to take the digestive enzymes as a pill, then you might look at foods like papaya or pineapple, and both of those have enzymes in them. Papaya has something called papain, and pineapple has something called bromelain, which help to digest food. So if you want to naturally add something to your diet that helps to digest food, then you want to look at doing something like a papaya, cut up a papaya and eat a papaya, or doing some papaya juice, or juicing a pineapple and doing pineapple juice. And unless your stomach is sensitive to the acid, then there are some other things that we can look at. The third thing is ginger. Ginger, and particularly peppermint. Now you have to be careful about peppermint because by nature peppermint relaxes muscles. So if you do peppermint before you go to bed, it actually could relax the lower esophageal sphincter and cause an increased reflux. But on the same token, peppermint is really great for facilitating digestion. So you want to be careful with how much peppermint you're adding, and I recommend combining peppermint with ginger so that you get the increased effects of digestion of the ginger and the peppermint and minimize the effects of the actual acid reflux itself. And then I have a little recipe for acid reflux that I'm going to share with you. So what you want to combine is a 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, 2 tablespoons of aloe, 1 tablespoon of honey, and 1/8 tablespoon of virgin coconut oil, and to 4 ounces of warm water. This is called an acid reflux tea. And what it does is not only neutralizes the acid in the stomach, but the aloe vera helps to heal the stomach lining, and the coconut oil helps to decrease the inflammation, and of course the honey just kind of gives it a sweet flavor, but it also coats the stomach as well. Drink this every night for at least 30 days, and that actually rebalances out the acid system in the stomach. There's another particular recipe that I'll share with you. You can combine 1 part fennel seeds, 1 part flax seeds, 1 part fenugreek seeds, and then 1 part spearmint leaves, and add that to a tea and drink that tea on a daily basis. Fennel and fenugreek are very good for digestion, as well as spearmint. And flaxseed provide the fiber that necessary that when you actually digest the food, it stays down. And then finally, you want to eat a food that's rich in celery or in potatoes, and red potatoes particularly, and cabbage. This soothes gastric inflammation, which can also increase the level of reflux or the feeling of heartburn. So, take-home points would be eating smaller, more frequent meals, including ginger and peppermint in your diet, avoiding your fatty, greasy foods, tobacco, alcohol, and caffeine, and trying the reflux tea recipe. Again, thanks Don for such a relevant question, and we hope that you soon will be able to get off that little purple pill. Again, you're with Dr. Maisha, and we're here creating your wellness blueprint. To find out more about this topic or to create your own blueprint, stop stress, and find peace of mind, go to www.create-your-blueprint.com, and here you can download your free guide to eliminating stress now, life on your terms, pathways to peace of mind. Look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great one. Namaste.